Welcome to the show. And Claudia, I want to start with a sentence I think a lot of families hear right before they completely run out of gas. You're so strong. Which sounds nice until it's being used like duct tape over a missing support system.
Right. You're so strong can turn into, so we will be providing absolutely nothing. That's the part that gets me. Resilience becomes the alibi for neglect.
Exactly. And for disabled people, for parents, for caregivers, there is this weird social script where if you're still answering texts and getting the kid to school and remembering the refill, people assume you're fine. But functioning is not the same as supported. It's like my sourdough starter on day 4. Technically alive, deeply unstable.
A bubbling jar of survival. Very appetizing. But yes, that distinction matters, because the numbers are not subtle here. Across surveys in 14 countries, parents of children with special needs had about 50% meeting criteria for depression and 69% meeting criteria for anxiety. 14 countries, 50 and 69 are not rounding errors. That's a flashing warning light.
The 69% for anxiety is the one that sticks in my ribs. Because it tells you this isn't just tough, weak territory. That's the nervous system living on high alert.
And the 50% depression figure means half. Half. If a bridge inspection found failure risk in half the structure, nobody would say, well, let's just admire the bridge's grit. We'd shut lanes, bring crews in, reroute traffic. But in family life, people say, hang in there.
That's such a Claudia analogy, and annoyingly, it's perfect. I remember a season. Both kids needed more, school stuff was intense, sleep was chaos. I was still packing lunches, still smiling at meetings, still doing my little teacher voice like everything was under control. And inside, I was just shrinking. Not dramatic collapse shrinking, quiet shrinking, which I think a lot of listeners know well.
Quiet shrinking is real. I had a version of that after a city presentation once. Very different context, but same mechanism. I performed competence so hard that my body apparently filed a complaint later. And in caregiver life, that delayed crash gets treated like personal weakness instead of predictable wear and tear.
And here's the tension I want us to stay with. Mental health support gets talked about like a spa add-on. Like, once you've handled the real stuff, maybe do something nice for yourself. No. For a disabled person, navigating a world that can be exhausting, and for caregivers holding 10 invisible systems together, mental health care is part of basic care.
Yes, not dessert, not a bonus feature, load-bearing infrastructure. If anxiety, depression, and burnout are this common, then counseling, medication management, peer support, respite, actual follow-up, those are not luxuries. They're utilities.
And I do want to push on one myth because it sneaks in wearing practical clothes. The myth is, well, everybody's overwhelmed, you just cope. I hate that one. Cope with what exactly? With inaccessible systems? With sleep deprivation? With a 6-month waitlist? We're asking people to white-knuckle problems that are structural.
I'll push back a tiny bit. Not on the myth, on the word. Because coping matters. People do need tools. Breathing room, routines, therapy, meds, whatever works. But the phrase just cope is poison because of the word just. That one little word erases the shortage, the cost, the paperwork, the transport, the stigma, all of it.
That's fair. So maybe the healthier version is, yes, build coping skills. And no, do not confuse coping skills with a substitute for care.
Exactly. A person can be incredibly skilled and still overloaded. In project management terms, competence does not increase infinite capacity. You can have a brilliant team and still blow the deadline if nobody funds the work.
Somewhere a listener just sat up because you turned burnout into a spreadsheet. But that's it. The problem isn't that people aren't trying hard enough, it's that too many are being asked to keep holding it together long after the beams underneath them have started to crack.
So, if mental health care is basic care, here's the ugly follow up: access is a maze. In the US, 23.4% of adults had mental illness in 2024, nearly 1 in 4. But only 52.1% received treatment. And even among adults with serious mental illness, treatment reached 70.8%. 70.8 sounds better, until you realize it still leaves almost 3 in 10 without care.
I keep landing on the 52.1. Half. We basically looked at 1 in 4 adults needing help and said, best we can do is coin flip. That's not a personal failure story. That's a systems story.
Yes, and the barriers are painfully concrete. More than 120 million people live in mental health shortage areas. 120 million. Then layer on cost, insurance gaps, time off work, transportation, childcare, finding someone who understands disability, and the average delay between symptom onset and treatment, about 11 years.
11 years? That's not a wait, that's a childhood. That's the time from kindergarten to driver's ed. If your symptoms show up early, an entire phase of life can pass before treatment actually starts.
And that delay changes outcomes. The longer somebody struggles alone, the harder daily life gets. Appointments get missed, work gets shakier, relationships fray. The system loves to intervene when things are catastrophic, but it is terrible at meeting people at mile 1, 2, or 3.
This is where the usual advice can feel almost comic. Somebody says, "Have you asked for a referral?" As if a referral is a golden ticket. Wonderful. I have a phone number, a portal login, and a fresh new reason to cry in a parking lot.
Parking lot crying is, unfortunately, a recognizable care pathway. But you're right, traditional referrals often work like this. One provider says, "You should call this other provider." Then the burden shifts entirely to the person who is already overwhelmed. They have to make the call, sit on hold, explain their story again, verify insurance, arrange transport, and hope the next office actually has an opening.
Let me try to explain it back. Traditional referral is basically, I believe you need help, and now I release you into the wilderness. Whereas integrated care says, no, we're walking with you to the next door. Is that close?
That's very close. And the phrase people use is warm handoff, which sounds corporate and a little awkward, but the idea is human. Same day support when possible. A direct introduction. Fewer steps between "I need help" and "I am speaking to someone." In a pilot using warm handoffs and same day behavioral health support, follow through improved dramatically, which honestly makes intuitive sense. If you reduce friction, more people get through.
The same day part is the jewel there, same day. Because distress has a shelf life. Motivation does too. If I finally say out loud, "I am not okay," and the answer is, "Great, can you do 3 forms and maybe call again next month?" That's how people disappear.
Exactly. And this matters even more for caregivers. Time is not abstract. Time is medication schedules, school calls, therapies, work shifts, traffic, maybe a sibling at home, maybe no backup. When we say access barrier, sometimes we mean a literal Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. with no one to cover.
And sometimes transport isn't just gas money. It's wheelchair-accessible rides. It's sensory load. It's figuring out whether the office itself is usable. People here make an appointment like it's one errand. For some families, it's a 3-act play with props.
Which is why I get prickly when mental health gets framed as a motivation issue. Most people are not failing to seek care because they don't care. They're navigating a badly designed system with depleted batteries.
I think about parents especially. If the kid's therapy, the specialist, the school meeting, if all of that gets done, the adult's own counselling appointment becomes the thing that slips. Not because it matters less, because the family triage board says this fire first. And after enough months of that, you start calling your own pain not urgent.
And that's the lie. Because untreated mental health doesn't politely stay in one corner. It spills into sleep, decision making, patience, physical health, relationships. It affects the whole household. Supporting the caregiver or disabled adult is not taking resources away from the family. It is stabilizing the family.
Which means access isn't a side issue, it is the issue. Therapy can help, medication can help, peer support can help, but only if the front door isn't hidden behind 11 years, 7 forms, and a hold soundtrack from 2004. So if the system is patchy, and it is, I think the practical question becomes, what can people build before the crisis hits? Not because individuals should have to patch every hole, but because waiting until you're underwater is rough. It's hard to learn to swim while swallowing pool water.
Yes. Think of support as everyday infrastructure, not emergency equipment. Peer support, community, and crisis planning work best when they're boring enough to exist before the emergency. If the first time you make a plan is during a spiral, the plan is already late.
And this doesn't have to be huge. I really like a 5-part version because it's manageable. 1 trusted person for check-ins, 1 professional contact, 1 peer space, 1 backup plan for medication or appointments, and 1 script for asking for help. 5 ones, not a giant impossible network map.
Let's take those one at a time, because the one trusted person is deceptively powerful. 1 person, not 10, not a whole village by Tuesday. 1 person who knows what "I'm having a bad week" actually means, and who can notice if you go quiet.
Yes, and that person needs clarity, not mind reading. You can literally say, if I text you just the word heavy, can you check on me tonight? I love a script because when your brain is scrambled, elegance is overrated. 1 word is enough.
The 1 professional contact matters for the same reason. It might be a therapist, primary care doctor, care coordinator, social worker, whoever is real and reachable, not some perfect future provider. A real name, a real number, somebody you could contact without reinventing your life.
And then peer space, which I think people sometimes underestimate because it doesn't look official. But talking to somebody who has lived a similar version of the thing, that's different. They don't need the whole glossary. You can skip the 3-minute preamble and get right to "school called again and I'm hanging by a thread."
Peer spaces also reduce the shame distortion. When 5 other people nod at something you've been privately treating as your personal failure, the room gets lighter. Not solved, lighter. That is not trivial.
The backup plan is the least glamorous and maybe the most useful. If you miss an appointment, who helps you reschedule? If medication runs low, what's the next step? If your usual ride falls through, what's plan B? I say this as a teacher, parent, human who has absolutely stared at a calendar like it personally betrayed me.
Calendars are traitors. But yes, backup planning lowers the stakes of normal disruption. We do this in infrastructure all the time. Redundancy is not pessimism, it's maturity. If one route fails, what keeps the system moving?
And then the script for asking for help, which sounds tiny until you need it. Something like, "I'm not in danger, but I'm not doing well. Can you stay on the phone while I make this call?" Or, "I need you to take 1 task off my plate today." That's different from the giant vague cloud of "help me," which can be hard for both people.
Can I add one tension here? Because some people hear lists like this and think, great, another assignment for the exhausted person. And they're not wrong.
Yeah, that's real.
So I think the key is scale. This is not optimize your support ecosystem. Please no. This is choose the smallest useful version. Text 1 friend. Save 1 number. Join 1 peer group, even if you mostly lurk. Write 1 sentence in your notes app. The point is not perfection. The point is reducing the distance between distress and connection.
That's such an important correction, because perfection is another trap, especially in disability and caregiving spaces. We already feel like we're supposed to know every acronym, anticipate every crisis, pronounce neurodiversity, there it is, I did it again, perfectly. But support doesn't need to be elegant to work.
And self sufficiency is not the gold medal people pretend it is. A good system catches strain early. It notices, it flexes, it gives people somewhere to land before the fracture.
Maybe that's the reframe I want to leave people with. Not, can I handle everything? Maybe the better question is, when the hard week comes, because it will, who or what catches me before I disappear inside it?
And if more of us built for that question, in families, clinics, schools, cities, how different might coping feel?